Hi, you're listening to the NewSpace India podcast, a bi weekly talk show that exclusively brings insights from the Indian space activities ecosystem. I'm your host, Narayan, the co founder of India's first space focused think tank, Spaceport Sarabhai. Guests on the NewSpace India podcast help you understand space activities related macro and micro trends within India in all aspects, including space history, local industry, space science, technology evolution, law and policy, art, and more. The NewSpace India podcast is supported by Dassault Systems, a global leader in providing businesses and people with collaborative virtual environments to enable sustainable innovations. Dassault Systems Solutions supports startups, small and medium-scale enterprises, and original equipment manufacturers in developing disruptive solutions for space launchers and satellites.
My name is Sridhara Murthi. I joined ISRO on 1st May 1975 after passing out from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I joined the then ISRO Satellite Systems project, which was responsible for the initial satellite projects of Indian Space Research Organization. Many of you may be wondering, after getting an MBA from a business school, why I joined a research organization, that too ISRO, which was at that time was relatively less known in the country. Well, I always like to take up challenging type of careers which are unique, but away from competition rat race. That could have been one of the reasons. Secondly, there were many of the earlier MBAs from the Indian Institutes of Management who have joined ISRO thanks to the vision of Dr. Sarabhai, who always believed in bringing together teams from different disciplines to work together. So I had opportunity to meet some of these young, very spirited people, Dr. Kiran Karnik, Sanjeev Deshmukh, who were at that time working for the satellite instructional television experiment in Ahmedabad. And I was very fascinated by the type of work they were doing, and particularly, experimenting on applications involving high technology like space technologies. There was also another connection. Dr. Vikram Sarabhai was also the founder of both the Indian Institute of Management as well as Indian Space Research Organization. In Indian Institute of Management, one of our senior professors, who was the first director too, encouraged us to look at public sectors, going to public sectors and working so that we can bring in management related revolution. So many of us, we were attracted towards that ideal also. All this combined made me to look at a career with Indian Space Research Organization, although at that point of time I was a bit apprehensive whether it could be a very successful career or not. So when I joined in Bangalore, it was a setting outside Bangalore in an industrial setting. This satellite project was going on in Pune, and I came and reported to Professor U.R. Rao, who was at that time the project director. The environment was very vibrant. Aryabhatta project, Aryabhatta satellite was it was launched, and there was feverish activity in analyzing the data that is being received from the satellite and to study the performance of various systems and so on. So the very atmosphere there was very vibrant, and it attracted me instantly, and the people were working on weekends also. There was wonderful, homely atmosphere. So this was the first experience I had with ISRO. And subsequently, very soon after the first satellite's success, ISRO started discussing about how satellites could be used for specific applications, how we can build satellites so that it can be useful for the applications like agriculture, studying weather, and so on and so forth. So, based on the experience of Aryabhatta, there was immediate plan to build a couple of satellites like Bhaskara 1 and 2, in which I was involved in some feasibility studies and so on. It was very exciting to do that at that point of time. Then subsequently, many management related aspects I could study. Now, it is also interesting to see, how a single project started by ISRO has transitioned into a permanent activity of generating various satellites into a program and multiple programs later on. The seeds, of course, was given by Dr. Sarabhai himself through his vision. He has put the mantra of self-reliance. He has also initially encouraged scientific activities. Scientific activities are the one which can universally connect people across different countries, because science by spirit and nature is universal. So it was easy to cooperate with other countries and to start activities. This can bring greater confidence in people. Self-reliance, international cooperation, and also looking at applications which are relevant to the country. All these seeds that are there in the organization has translated into a culture of looking at how the initial scientific satellite project could be converted into a tangible applications program. So there were many management challenges. How to transform the structure of the organization, which are more organic for one single project, into a center which require some kind of permanence, some kind of better structure to encourage multiple projects at the same time. So we had to think of infrastructure building, which can be commonly used across various projects. And also, a system in which a organizational structure in which, once a project is over, immediately all the people who are involved can be redeployed meaningfully into activities. So we had to think of activities like technology development programs, which can be useful for future satellite projects. We thought of infrastructure building, infrastructure planning activities, and so on and so forth, and developing human resources. It was completely a learning culture which attracted us. There was no hierarchical, rigid separations that were encouraged in the organization. There were frequent review meetings so that people could express freely across different levels. This is something which is very unique in ISRO organization, which had made it possible to undertake very successfully the multidisciplinary activities and to have effective communication systems. So many such unique organizational culture we can see, even in those early days, which has helped later on to convert the learning experience into experiments which are of large scale, end-to-end projects like, building experimental satellites for communications and testing it out and so on. And then from the experimental satellites going to operational satellites, where there could be greater accountability, service standards and so on built into the thing, so that they can become vehicles for future commercialization and expansion of industrial activities. So the seeds for a logical growth of activities was possible through the culture that was developed. Another important thing I would like to say is what made ISRO tick was a kind of adherence to meritocracy. This was very important. We were not aware of any other consideration than, merit, either in the recruitment, placement, promotions, and also, in terms of providing opportunities. These were all based on a merit. So the organization there could be built on greater trust, greater cooperation, and so on. This is very important. The second aspect I always enjoyed is the cosmopolitan atmosphere. There were people from different states of India. Almost it is like mini India. When we were working there, we could see people from different states interacting, and we could learn from each other. That atmosphere was wonderful. So all this took me into actively participating. Normally, the MBAs, it is said that they don't stay in an organization for more than 1 or 2 years. But, it was very different in my case. And, I stayed throughout. And in fact, this is the case with many other MBAs also in our organization, who after joining stayed throughout till the completion of the service. So this is a unique environment of our organization that we enjoyed, and we could take up, greater responsibilities and roles. So I would like to recount some of the areas in which, I could work and also see the growth, success of the organization. In the initial days, there was very little infrastructure, and we had to seek the support of industries. So consciously, ISRO has taken measures to develop industries. So certain programs were thought of. Even in the middle of 1970s, when the program had its beginnings, there was a group formed called Technology Transfer Group, for which Dr. Siddhartha was made chairman, and there were many engineers who were representing different centers of ISRO. So I was representing from the satellite center in this group. And this is the group which initially was given the mandate. Whatever ISRO can do, it should be unique. What industry can do, ISRO should not do. ISRO should use the capabilities of industry. So this ethos was very strong. And, we started thinking how professionally we can develop capabilities in industry by transferring the technologies. So a professional system of technology transfer was developed initially under the chairmanship of Dr. Siddhartha, and subsequently with Dr. Sudarshan. So this was a wonderful time where we found that, in 3 different ways we can develop industry participation. One is ISRO needs a lot of systems for its own space projects. So to make industries incentivized, we devised a scheme of buyback and creating divisions in industry, space divisions in industries like HAL, then Walchand Nagar Industries, Larsen and Toubro, Godrej. And all these, have become the busy centers who supplied, the systems, hardware, and many products for ISRO's projects. The technology wherewithal, wherever necessary, was given to industry by ISRO through the technology transfer system. And virtually, ISRO engineers used to go and stay in industry, solve the problems, and they given hand-holding support for them. Another category of items we looked at is there are many products which are required when the space systems are to be used. Typically, this could be a ground system to receive information from a satellite, or equipment used in communications and so on. These are needed not only by ISRO but also the users. So they are required in larger numbers. So the technology which is developed by ISRO, which is incidentally required even when you develop a space hardware to test it out, it could be shared with industry, or sometimes even developed in participation with industry. This is a strategy which was followed in the Space Application Center. And there could be larger demand for direct receiving systems from satellites and so on. This was transferred to industry. This was another category. The third category is more interesting. What is very uniquely developed for space, whether we could use it for spin-off applications, like some of the eutectic powders, which are chemical powders which are used to control the fire. Special fires like metal fires or oil fires and so on. This could be useful, although it was specifically developed in the context of space requirement. So these spin-off products were many, and these insulators, the sensors and so on, which can find larger in the context of larger applications, we could share with industry and develop. So as many as 200 technologies we could promote. But then, how do we, when we looked at the field, there was very little success rate. We tried to see what is the reason why people are not able to transfer the technology from a technical organization to industry. Then we found that there were always intermediaries between those people who develop the technology and the recipients. This has reduced the efficiency, and many times it also made technology transfer a failure. So we thought that we should cut short this and bring in a direct contact between the development teams and the industry teams. And then how does industry know what is being developed here? So we started a system of making announcements, preparing interest exploration notes, giving a brief about the technology, possible application and so on. We took some young people from the management schools. There are many management schools, and young people are very energetic. They can travel, they can meet people and so on. So they can study about the market needs and get us the feedback so that we could fine-tune the product to the needs of the users. And then there is a question of pricing. Many times when you transfer a technology, the capacity of the industry to take it, and the industry is taking risk, they may not know what exactly is the market that will be there. So initially they would like to commit less, and subsequently they could, when the sales are good, they could share their revenues. So we could have a flexible pricing system. The principles for pricing were decided, and so on and so forth. The post-transfer servicing, the updating of technologies, hand-holding during the initial testing in industry, all this very professionally we got developed. And this went a long way in developing very cordial relations with the industry. So it helped us to develop many industries which started taking part in the generating many products indigenously, which otherwise were not available. There were many materials. These included even public sector organizations and private organizations. These could be special alloys. When we started the second rocket, PSLV, it needed a special type of steel called maraging steel. We went to the innovative process organization like Mishra Dhatu Nigam in Hyderabad to develop this special material. And the aluminum industry came to our rescue, and then a large number of fabrication industry in building very special equipment for coatings, vacuum coatings, testing systems, because you need simulators which simulate the space conditions. So such special equipment could be built by industry. There were large number of items we could take up, even electronic parts, and then this special type of detectors like charge coupled devices. And then in communication you use amplifiers, so traveling tube amplifiers, which is based on field effect transistor based systems and so on. So all this type of developments could be undertaken by industry with technical interface from ISRO's support. So this has helped us to withstand and real self-reliance we could achieve. Self-reliance was not a taboo in ISRO. Self-reliance was broadly interpreted. ISRO didn't want to reinvent the wheel. But if a part or an item is critical, ISRO wanted to have an alternative so that a small item could not hold a big program to ransom. So this was the wisdom with which, the self-reliance was, developed, principle was implemented in ISRO. And also always, we had the alternatives, plan B, as part of the project planning activities. And the review systems involving outside experts brought a lot of inputs into the organization, a kind of objective look into the system. So all this made very robust type of system within ISRO. And then, ISRO was also very pragmatic. We started developing satellites, we started developing launch vehicles. When we did this, satellites, it was required that larger and larger satellites gave better economies. So we needed larger satellites. But launch vehicle technologies were more complicated. Help was not easily available from outside. So it was taking longer time. So we could launch only smaller satellites. So here we have a difference. So we had to independently pursue the path of excelling in satellites, building higher efficiency, higher weight satellites on one side, particularly for communications, and also trying to see how we can adapt the satellites we build for the launch vehicles. So in remote sensing satellites, where we completely wanted to go in indigenous approach, we made the satellites smaller, more compact. We took a risk to adapt technologies which are more advanced. So we could produce smaller systems with better performance. With the effect that in the middle of 1995, we became best in the civilian domain for the remote sensing satellites, which gave us access to the global market. Now this industrialization is a wonderful area with lots of specific large participation from ISRO engineers and a development saga, which has given very strong footing for the self-reliant efforts of the program. This is very much vindicated in 1992. There was technology denial because of the missile technology control regime, and we had to fully pursue indigenous route to develop cryogenic engines for our launch vehicles, geostationary launch vehicle program. So at this point of time, we could withstand and also continue with our programs because of the strong base that is built in industrial side. So what is the vision for this industry development? Space industries are the instruments for the growth of the program. If we look at the world was moving towards having greater and greater private participation. Private companies were making satellites. They were owning satellites. They were providing services. And they were also looking at global markets. So a space industry, when developed in India, has to have a ultimate vision of growing into an entity which can play globally on equal footing. This is the ultimate vision with which, we have to take the industry development. So we were wondering how we reach this stage. Right now, all the industries only are serving the Indian needs, Indian space project needs. And also, there is no industry which is integrating the total system. There is no industry which is owning the total space systems. So we thought that, initially we need to look at some policies which will be enablers for industry to come into a stage in which, they can move up in the value chain. And secondly, eventually they should be enabled to play a global role. So what is coming in the way? Why industries in India are not thinking like America, investing into these areas? There are several reasons. One is the access to technologies. Second is the risk involved. Space requires large investments, and also the gestation is very long. They have to wait for a long time to get the returns. And also space systems per se provide less return. So unless there is a huge market for applications, which in fact, is the space system is an upstream system. It is the services, which is a larger market. Probably if you have a one rupee investment into a space segment, you can generate a business of 15 rupees. That is 1:15 is the ratio in which, the upstream investments and the services can work. So Indian industry naturally was attracted more to play a role of, providing services with the space systems made available through someone who is taking greater risk. So the Indian government, tried to provide that facility, but this is only the beginning. Eventually, industry itself should even get into the investment into the space segment. So on policy front, ISRO started looking at space communications policy, where there was a vision of, providing a route for ownership from the Indian satellites, and also sharing whatever is the government assets, sharing the capacity for the services provided by the private sector. These were enabled, at least in the beginning. The other was also relating to the space imaging related policies. There also, the sharing of data that is owned by the satellites of government was enabled. So these policies came into picture. But at the same time, there were other elements which were required, which were not ready at that point of time. So this, even for decades, this couldn't take off. So in the initial stages, we have to think of an intermediary system which can allow the Indian industries to create heritage so that eventually, they can see the global market. This is the concept in which, Mr. Sudarshan, who was a great champion of this corporate front, we created a corporate front in ISRO, which was required to think of creating an interface for the industry so that, they could participate and satisfy the global requirements. So we created a company under ISRO as a marketing arm. So this company did not get into, large investments. It intended to use the facilities of ISRO wherever, it is available, and also the expertise of ISRO, because it is ISRO's own company, so access is better. But at the same time, use the capacity in industry also, and service the global markets. So I moved naturally from looking into the industry interface activities to commercialization activities. That is how I got introduced into commercialization. So we created this company, and this company initially took up the challenge of marketing the images. What were the challenges we faced at that time? We were not known at all. We didn't have any pedigree in marketing globally. Secondly, we didn't have the marketing infrastructure. So whatever efforts we made to provide, although we were very competitive, it was not very easy for us to enter into the market. Then we started looking at who are the best in the world who have this marketing infrastructure. So we had the opportunity to collaborate and create a exclusive marketing tie-up with the American company in space. At that time, it was called Iconas, and subsequently it became, the GOI, and then space imaging and so on. So we created this tie-up and started marketing our ground systems, the systems which can receive data, remote sensing data from the satellites. And also we started providing data to the global users through this marketing tie-up. So that is how the story of our imaging sales. So our satellite could fill the global map. Almost all continents, we had facilities to receive the data. As many as 22 ground stations came up. And the kind of collaborations that were enabled made it possible to make some innovations also. Very interesting thing. Normally those days, the satellite data was being received through very large systems, almost 6 to 7 meter dishes. You need a separate building, a lot of investment for somebody who wants to receive the data and, do business. So there were innovations from Russians at that time, a company there, which produced, small ground stations. And also there was innovations of mobile stations, which can move from one place to another and receive data depending on the need. This was very attractive to defense forces. So many such innovative methods of receiving data from satellite could be possible. And then, we could have a worldwide presence. We had a couple of problems then. What has happened? This is a big company which is marketing data from American satellites. When we started, there was none, but subsequently, they had their own satellites. And then, we were providing data. There was no possibility of building our brand. Our name is not projected. It was always, even when we are giving through our satellite, there was no way in which we could build brand image globally, which was necessary if eventually, we need to have a stable global business. So this was one of the problems we faced. Then how to overcome this? The second, of course, it was an exclusive arrangement, and, the company had its own priorities. So the amount of returns were almost 50% of the revenues were to be shared with the company. It was a big company, number one company. So it was negotiating wise, it was becoming difficult. So we thought that, we should independently go and try out. And secondly, we should build our own brand. So there was efforts towards that, and we started in that direction. There was also a very good type of awareness created through the images, which benefited us. For example, in Europe, we had one company which was marketing our data. They have extensively used to participate in projects like wall-to-wall Europe, wall-to-wall imaging. That was called like that because the entire Europe was homogeneously mapped and our images were used. And because of this kind of applications, we had tremendous amount of feedback from user point of view. When our data was to be used in the global context, what is the kind of technical improvements we should make in terms of the ground processing and so on, we could get a very good handle on that. So the commercial activities, apart from putting greater accountability on us because of the demands of the users, have also resulted in improving our products. This is about remote sensing. Then we also started about what about other capabilities. ISRO has a very broad range of capabilities. It can make satellites. Already its launch vehicles are proven. It has started launching all remote sensing satellites from our own country. And, it has tremendous other capabilities. How can we make use of those capabilities for the commercial, putting our capabilities into the global market? So we started thinking about it and started exploring that direction. The first came the challenge of, how to market our launch services. Those days, there were only few options for launching small satellite systems. But then there was dumping in the market. So it was not easy for us to make entry into the market. The greatest challenge is, since we had till then less number of launches as compared to Russian vehicles or American vehicles or European vehicles, the commercial insurance companies were not coming and offering, viable solutions to the customers. So initially, to get entry into the market, initial flights, we had to give relaunch guarantees. Like, the Ariane also had initially, such a system. So we got into the market, and then, then we thought, what will make a difference in marketing the launch services? Two things we found. There was a wonderful support from the Launch Vehicle Program Office of ISRO, and also the center which produces launch vehicle, the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, and a center where launches take place, that is the Sriharikota range. With the support of all this, we made, the customer service as the key differentiator. One thing, keeping to the schedule. So if somebody comes for launch and he wants to launch by the end of the year, we were ready to offer the launch. This is one difference. And also, we also made price very affordable. Coming to the risk, we gave the launch guarantee. So all this, there were regular launches, so people started coming. Then we found that, we have sufficient capacity to offer multiple launches. Now, with the help of some companies, with ISRO's own efforts, we could develop interfaces for launching multiple satellites. This is something. And our launch vehicle also could offer launch into different orbits, which were not so easy for small satellites which go as piggybacks along with bigger satellites in launch vehicles. So all these advantages of offering multiple type of orbits, multiple satellites at a time for better economy, better customer service made a difference. And today, without a single failure, there is also, I think, fortune favored on our side in terms of the statistical, it is statistically impossible to have 342 satellites or whatever it is from 34 countries without a single failure. All of them. So it was a tremendous, very soon we came to a situation, the commercial insurance companies told that, we offer almost same insurance premium cost to the customers at the same rates as the most reliable vehicles of the world. So this was a wonderful thing. And of course, this continues. The third area of, how we can build the satellites. So here we thought that, unless we have earlier supplied satellites to some customer and built the heritage, it was not possible to even enter the competition, because the competition conditions required that you should have successfully done the business earlier. So to begin with, you need a success, but that is denied because you are a startup there. So we thought that the best way for us is to go with a company where we could find a synergy. So we could do that with the European Astrium company, which was a very successful, well-known company. So we had to forge a tie-up. Now we are government company, they are a private company. How do we bring this successful private-public partnership? Even today, it's the biggest challenge in India. I was discussing about it this morning. Even today, we don't have a very good model in high-tech areas relating to public-private partnership. Probably one of the reasons why we are not able to progress very well in the commercialization. But here, we could build that. We said, what are the things which come in the way when public and private companies have to, come together? So, one of the important things is the risk. If there is a failure, who shares the risk? We can divide the, revenues, but then, there is also some penalty in case, you are not successful. And that will be known only after, you supply the satellite. Although insurance is there and all that, there is some amount of penalty which you have to bear. And how do you share this risk between the two companies? So this is a very ticklish thing. It is very difficult to establish when two teams come together and work from two different cultures. You have to prove that, it is like a single team. For a customer, it should be a single team. So we had to innovate on an organizational system, risk sharing. We said that irrespective of anything, we will share 50-50 risk if there is a failure. And we have to bear the penalty of that failure. So this clarified many things. So that there is no one-upmanship and, you see all this maneuvering is not necessary once, you have a clarity. Both of us, we are sharing equally. And that was a wonderful formula which gave us success. We could successfully bid win 2 satellite contracts and supply to the Europe. So customer for one is a huge company, service company, the Eutelsat. The other was a company in UK, and this second satellite was innovative at that time. And also that company was making satellite, our partner was making satellites, we were making satellites. Is there no conflict? We have to resolve that issue also, because we are also marketing, they are also marketing. We should not compete with each other. So how do we resolve? Then we divided. Our strong point is smaller satellites. So up to 4.5 kilowatt power satellites we will be providing, and beyond that they will be providing. So this conflict was also resolved. So it was, all this shows if there is a will, there is a possible solution in a spirit of give and take, so that we can build in synergy. And any issues, if it is pre-decided, I think the teams can work wonderfully, learn from each other, take advantage of the strengths of each. This is what we demonstrated through this system. So the commercialization phase was also very interesting, very challenging, and we have to constantly innovate and keep tuned to the dynamically to the needs of the environment. Although we were working in a government setup, we could do many things because of this constant response to opportunities, as well as the best support we had from a wonderful organization like ISRO, as I was mentioning. So it was very exciting for me to work with this organization and to complete my full term with this organization. These are some of the things I wanted to share. Of course, it's a long journey. Not always, we were meeting success, but with each a setback also we were learning. That was the culture of the organization. And each time some setback is there, people always, our leaders at least, we experienced that they encouraged us to look at, what we learned out of that, how not to repeat the mistakes, how to correct the situation. This was a kind of sentiment rather than, going witch hunting and so on. This also developed some kind of a free enterprise within the organization, so that so many things could be achieved. So many missions, successful missions, so many instruments were, I think there are as many as 100 instruments which were developed within the country, and industry could develop many new systems. All this was possible because of the culture and the leadership we enjoyed in this organization. Now, when we have these initial successes, of course, we had a lot of attention because this was a new activity. Initially, the media gave a lot of publicity. Each successful launch, we were on the front page. There came a situation, one of our INSAT launches went to the second page. So immediately, Chairman ISRO called us and said that why we are losing the attention of the public. Is it because we have become less relevant? Are we not thinking of new things and exploring the new frontiers? What is the reason? Then we decided we will have every week a kind of evening session with some of the intellectuals in the city. So we could take a meal and then have a thing. In one of those, we were meeting one of the scientists who was leading a scientific research institution here. And he mentioned there are many things which are less known about moon. Its own origin, okay, as the evidence is available. And the completely it is a dry bone planet, no water there, and so on and so forth. He told about some of the unresolved questions about the moon. Even before that, it caught our attention, and the chairman immediately he assembled a team. There was a team to look at the mission possibilities. And even a couple of years earlier, there was a publication from one of our engineers who explored different ways of reaching moon. And what is the least, one which demands least of energy and so on. The other beaten path traditionally which is being used by others and so on. These three options were looked at, and they studied with the launch vehicle capability we have. We could find that, we could have a mission to the moon, at least technically. Now, how do we bring in instruments required for study of various aspects of the moon? What is that we are going to study? So we thought that whatever instruments we develop, we should also give some opportunity for international cooperation. International cooperation is a wonderful thing, which ISRO can develop further. And in this context, we should provide through this mission opportunities for international payloads. So it was possible to make announcements of opportunities, and choose among them. We had very prominent institutions from US, Bulgaria, Europe, European Space Agency, Japan, and so on. We had wonderful proposals, and we could have almost half of the instruments from different agencies in this one single mission, which was a smaller satellite, which could be launched through the Indian vehicle, and it became a kind of thing. But then, there could always be criticism. You see, you have so many needs in the country. Why are you spending money on a esoteric mission like moon mission? Why should you go there? What is the use of science? Anyway, many countries are studying about it. So to address this question, a lot of preparatory activities were undertaken. The academics who are there, the industry people, there were consultations through associations like the academies in the country and so on. So there was a kind of a single voice, and also there was a political support. So in fact, this mission was announced by Prime Minister for first time during the Independence Day speech, and that put a very strong justification with the backdrop of preparatory activities which were pushed by our chairman, because he felt that there should be a consensus when we undertake missions of this kind. People may interpret that we are moving away from the initial vision of ISRO to sharply focused on the developmental applications. But science also has got its spin-offs, its relevance, meaning for younger people. So working in these frontier areas is something which we cannot ignore also. So that is what we could achieve through the mission like Chandrayaan mission. So I had a lot of opportunity in working in the international cooperation sphere. For a short time of 3 years and odd, I was the scientific secretary of ISRO, directly under the staff of Chairman ISRO, and also coordinating with all the program offices and centers of ISRO, looking after activities relating to the outreach from space, international cooperation, human resources development, the budget and resources, all these different offices, coordinating with them, and then guiding and so on. This role was also very interesting. As part of this role, I was able to do a lot of participate in international cooperation activities. And also I had an opportunity to go to Europe, be a part of our embassy in Paris, to liaise with the space organizations and space industry in Europe. And particularly it was a time when we have to build relations in the most healthy way, and also participate in the United Nations related activities in the COPUS and other, that is Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and so on. So I had wonderful opportunity to meet various people, and I could see that lot of respect is commanded for the capabilities of engineers in India, in ISRO and so on, because they were exposed to many of the engineers going and working, training in the European establishments and cooperating for the tracking network cooperation. And also we had wonderful opportunity to build joint missions. When I was there, we debated a lot to build a strong synergetic mission between France and India, because things were coming down. So the coordinator from the French National Space Agency and I was debating a lot to think of something. And during one of our chairman's visit, we could come up with an idea to have a joint mission. Subsequently, this became the famous, Megatropics mission, the mission to study the water cycle, which is so important. Little is known about the complete water cycle of Earth. So this was a wonderful opportunity that I had to work in various international cooperation activities also, and to build up areas. Here the challenge was mainly, our interests aligned with many space powers, because space has a global outlook, global perspectives and so on. So we had alignment with the concerns of the major space powers and spacefaring countries on one side. We were also a developing country, so we had the empathy for the use of space applications and so on. So we had to balance both of this, and this was possible through the international cooperative activities. So it was a wonderful journey. Anyway, I had a lot of learning through this career, and subsequently I thought that I should spend or use this experience in sharing this excitement, knowledge and everything that I gained, spirit that I gained with young people in the university. That is where I am engaged into right now. Thank you.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of the NewSpace India podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share this episode with anyone you believe will enjoy listening to it. You'll be able to find the NewSpace India podcast in any of the podcasting platforms that you may be using, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Do subscribe to the podcast in case you want to receive new episodes automatically. I'm grateful if you're able to leave a rating for the podcast, which will help others discover it. Thank you for listening in again, and the next episode will be out in the next 2 weeks as usual.